You're listening to Family Today with Funmi Johnson.
This is Family Today with Funmi Johnson. It's all about Christmas. It's a few days to Christmas and we need to talk about this. I have this question coming in again. I may do a little bit of teaching today, so you just need to stay glued. If you miss any of the points, go to the Funmi Johnson on my YouTube channel, on Instagram, on Facebook, on Threads, X, everything. You can follow this conversation there. This is a question from a man and he's in a lot of confusion. He's really upset. I'm going to read it. My wife Jane and I have been married for 12 years and we have a daughter, 10. Each year when Christmas comes around, Jane and I seem to have the worst fights of all. Oh my goodness. Why would Christmas bring so much fight? And they are about Christmas. I would like to see just the three of us exchange one or two gifts, but Jane wants lights all over the house, the lawn decorated, a big Christmas tree, extravagant presents, and relatives at our house on Christmas Day. Back when we were first married, I did things our way because I wanted to make her happy, but our way always made me miserable. Now I find myself spending a valuable weekend each year struggling to decorate our house and spending another weekend taking the decorations down, buying and trimming a Christmas tree that I don't want in my house, spending far more than we can afford on gifts we don't need, and having people over that I can't stand to be around. I'm trapped in this nightmare called Christmas. How can I escape without getting divorced? Now this is the conversation. I mean, if you're a counselor and you get this kind of question, what would you do? I'm not going to be able to open the phone lines today because this is not just about this guy and his wife. There are a lot of people in this same kind of situation. So I'm going to let us really sit down and drill down. But first of all, let me say this. Get this. Most of the time, this confusion and the conflict and the confrontation and the fights we have in our marriages are not always about the topic. They're about an underlying problem that we have not solved. So I want you to take that first. This is not about Christmas tree. This is not about Christmas. There's more to this than Christmas. There's more to this than Christmas tree. And we're going to look at that. So I say Christmas is a time of the year when many decisions must be made. Sometimes cards, some family believe in sending out cards, some believe in exchanging gifts, so there will be wrapping to be done, there will be the gift to be bought, So sometimes are you buying for nuclear families, are you buying for extended families? Some families don't have a dichotomy, and I was talking to someone recently and he said to me, this is my sister. I said, your sister? I know you have only 3 siblings. Where did this one come from? And I said, no, it's my mother's younger sister's daughter. I said, that's not your sister, that's your cousin. And he said, no, it's my sister. I said, no, don't go and write that in the embassy form. They'll claim that it's fraud. I said, that's your first cousin. And then this one is also the daughter to my mother's youngest. I said, that becomes a second cousin. I said, you must know. And after the third cousin, we stopped counting. I said, no way. In my father's house, all of them are my siblings. I said, that's not true. The English definition of sibling is different from cousin, is different from aunt, from nephew, from niece, and you need to know that. But that's because in some homes, they believe that the nuclear family is exclusive and all the other people are outsiders. In some other homes, the cousin can enter the bedroom of their aunt and all that. So these are all the things we need to look at. So I say Christmas is a time when many decisions must be made. So some people now will have to make a Christmas list, how and when to decorate your Christmas tree, what to serve, who to invite to your home for Christmas, where to spend Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, how to pay for all these. These are but a few of the decisions that put enormous pressure on most families at this time of the year. So what is happening to that person that asked the question is that they haven't resolved how they intend to arrive at conclusions in their decision making. So So when the time for Christmas comes and all these decisions have to be made, that's when they realize that they didn't conclude on that same issue last year. So that thing that you kept under the carpet last year will just rear its head again. So the strength of a marriage is tested when decisions must be made. If a husband and wife have learned to discuss each issue with respect for each other's perspective, avoiding anger, disrespect, or demands, Christmas decisions draw them down and increase their love for each other. That's because their decisions take the feelings of both of them into account simultaneously. They create a Christmas that is enjoyable for the entire family. I know some people that like to have people over at Christmas. I know some people that would like to have a me time at Christmas. So if a husband and wife, they have not agreed, or if you don't know what's the take of your spouse, then you are always going to have that conflict. So it's important. So what I said is, in a good marriage, when that decision time comes up, it's okay, because you already know what your wife likes, you already know what your husband prefers, and when you're thinking and you're making your choices, you're putting that into consideration. So it strengthens the marriage even further in a good marriage. But in a bad marriage, conflicts are not resolved with mutual consideration. Instead, husbands and wives try to force decisions on each other without taking each other's feelings into account. That leads to a Christmas filled with resentment and unhappiness. So what kind of marriage are you living in? Is it the good one or the bad one? But let me just tell you the good news. If it's the bad one, there is room for crossing to the other side. So what we're going to be looking at today is, how do we work on our decision making? So that's what I'm saying. I'm not opening the phone lines. How do we make the right decisions in marriage? Because it's not just about Christmas. It's just that a lot of decisions needs to be made at Christmas. Okay. Now, also in Africa, we're catching up with the Western world. We are repeating and doing the same things that they do. They also now exchange gifts at Christmas. They also put boxes under the Christmas tree, and they have to open the boxes on Boxing Day. And so we're looking at all those things. Then you want to know where we're spending Christmas. Are we going to your father's house or my father's house? Or are we staying in our house? Are we inviting people over? Are we eating out? So all these are things that need to be done. So what we want to do is, there are 6 steps I'm going to be sharing with you to help you in decision making, and will ultimately now help in your celebrating Christmas. So there are 6 things that you should follow with each decision you make about the way you'll be celebrating Christmas. So what I will be talking about today is actually decision making. Now let's go. Remember, you can get all the points when you follow the Funmi Johnson. Number 1, resolving conflict requires knowing, accepting, and adjusting to your differences. It requires knowing, accepting, and adjusting to your differences. Now, one of the reasons we have conflict in marriage is because usually opposites attract. But that thing that attracted you to your spouse has right behind it something that will attack your spouse's preference. Usually, a task-oriented individual marries someone who is more people-oriented. I'm a very task-oriented person. My husband is a very people-oriented person. So usually, those two would naturally kind of gravitate, come together. Also, people who move through life at breakneck speed seem to end up with spouses who are slower paced. I don't really know why that happens. It's strange, but it does happen. But that's part of the reason why you married who you did. Because there's something in that person that you know you don't have naturally, and that person possesses. And it just makes you glued to that person. So your spouse added a variety, a spice, and a difference to your life that it did not have before. So I'm sure you lose sight of that, but really that's why the opposite usually attract. You're like, bam, neck break speed. That's the way you move. You marry someone that will be slower. So, but after being married for a while, sometimes a short while, the attractions become repellent. You may argue over small irritations, such as, why would you just not stand up on time when we say something? I was with a couple on a ride, and their daughter was about to fall off. Not really fall off dangerously, but immediately the wife just dived and the husband was still watching and deciding And then the wife starts screaming, you are closer to her. How come? Didn't you see? Hey! It could be a personality thing. It could be that the man was trying to teach the girl how to handle things, how to survive. But it almost caused a fracas. It almost spoiled the whole mood because everybody now knew what happened. Also, the danger tolerance for each person. Maybe the wife is danger averse completely, and the husband thinks, no, we should allow this girl to fall as long as she's not going to break a leg, and then she will stand up again. You may find that your backgrounds and your personalities are so different that you wonder how and why God placed you together in the first place. The things you like, the things you prefer, the way you handle things, they are so different. It is important to understand these differences and then to accept and adjust to them. Now, the point is this: resolving conflict requires knowing, accepting, and adjusting to your differences. So if you do not know, if you do not accept, you will not be able to adjust. So the first call I'm making to all spouses is, do you know your differences? Are you willing to accept that this man is slow? Are you willing to accept that this woman is a spender? Are you willing to accept that your husband is a relationship person and likes people around? Are you willing to accept that your wife is a lone ranger? She enjoys her own space and she can entertain herself. You need to, first of all, know who your spouse is, then accept who they are. Then we can now start talking about how do you adjust to your revelation. So most times we break these families because we don't know this. And then we now say we've come to the point of irreconcilable difference. And then we say it's all about Christmas. I hate Christmas. It's not about Christmas. It's about not knowing your wife, not knowing your husband, and not accepting who they are. I also want to say this before we go on a short break. When you accept your spouse, what you have accepted is the 80 or 70% that is in front. Right behind that 70% is the 20 to 30% that you did not see, or you choose to ignore, or you did not like, or you were so excited at the 70% that you left it. Now that I'm talking to you, you have to take that 70 and take the 30 as well. It's important. Most marriages break because we leave that 70 for a 20 that we're missing, that we see outside. We see it in our secretary, we see it in our boss at work, we see it in our friend, we see it in our ex at 30. Always in the other person. But most times we lose the 70 in search of that 20 or 30. So my first point to you is discover who your spouse is. Accept the 70 and the 30. And now we plan on how to adjust to it. We go on a short break right now. We continue this conversation after the short break.
Paul says it is better for a single man to marry than to burn. Are you single, married, widowed, separated, or divorced? Join me on Family Today.
Family Today with Funmi Johnson is one program that will bring you in alignment with who you truly are and open your mind to how you rock your significant interpersonal relationships while sidestepping the landmines, culture, religion, and society have laid in your path. Family Today with Funmi Johnson goes where others are shy to go and shines the light in the dark corners others have forgotten. Tune in at 11:30 a.m. every Friday to listen to Family Today with Funmi Johnson on Inspiration 92.3 FM.
Okay, we're back. This is Family Today with Funmi Johnson. Remember, you can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Threads, X, everything. The Funmi Johnson. I'm talking about decision making and how we can have beautiful Christmas every year. Number 2, resolving conflict requires defeating selfishness. All our differences are magnified in marriage because they feed what is undoubtedly the biggest source of our conflict, ourself, our sinful nature. So that's why marriage accentuates who you are, good or bad. So maintaining harmony in marriage has been difficult since the time of Adam and Eve. Two people beginning their marriage together and trying to go their own selfish, separate ways can never hope to experience the oneness of marriage as God intended. You know, Isaiah said this over 2,500 years ago. Say, all of us like sheep have gone astray. Each one of us has turned to his own way. Isaiah 53 verse 6. We are all self-centered. We all instinctively look out for number one, and that leads directly to conflict. You make yourself number one. Especially in this time, the way we talk about self-love. Marriage offers a tremendous opportunity to do something about selfishness. You see, I've been married for 32 years, and I've seen God working on me, on my partner, even after 32 years. So God has changed both of us. So the answer for ending selfishness is found in Jesus and his teaching. So if you really want to embrace Christmas, let's start with that. He showed us that instead of wanting to be first, we must be willing to be last. Instead of wanting to be served, we must serve. Instead of trying to save our lives, we must lose them. We must love our neighbors. The first neighbor you have is your spouse, as much as you love yourself. In short, if we want to defeat selfishness, we must give up, give in, and give all. Let's look at Philippians chapter 2. In verse 1, it says, therefore, if there is any encouragement in Christ, if there is any consolation of love, if there is any fellowship of the Spirit, if there is any affection and compassion, make my joy complete by being the same mind, maintaining the same love, united in spirit, intent on one purpose. Do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind, regard one another as more important than yourselves. Do not merely look out for your own personal interests, but also for the interest of others. Have this attitude in yourself, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, although he existed in the form of God, did not regard equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself, taking the form of a bondservant, and being made in the likeness of men, being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on the cross. So that's Philippians chapter 2 verse 1 to 8. This is Christ giving himself as a gift, and we're now laying out the foundation of our beautiful life on that foundation of Christ. So to experience oneness, you must give up your will for the will of another. But to do this, you must first give up your will to Christ, and then you will find it possible to give up your will for that of your spouse. That's why we're having problems. Number 3, resolving conflict requires pursuing the other person. It requires doing what? Pursuing the other person. Romans chapter 12 verse 18 says, if it is possible, as much as it depends on you, live peaceably with all men. The longer I live, the more I realize how difficult those words are for many couples. Living peaceably means pursuing peace. It means taking the initiative to resolve a difficult conflict rather than waiting for the other person to take the first step. To pursue the resolution of a conflict means setting aside your own hurt, anger, and bitterness. It means not losing heart. Many challenge to you is to keep your relationship current. In other words, resolve that you will remain in solid fellowship daily with your spouse, as well as with your children, with your parents, with your co-workers, and with friends. So, don't allow Satan to gain a victory by isolating you from someone you care about. So, I've said 3 things now. Number 1, resolving conflict requires knowing, accepting, and adjusting to your differences. Also, resolving conflict requires defeating selfishness. And number 3, resolving conflict requires pursuing the peace of the other person. Pursuing peace with all men. Pursuing the other person to create an atmosphere of peace. Another thing that you would not like to talk about is resolving conflict requires loving to confront confrontation. Loving confrontation. I know a lot of men don't like this, and they complain that women talk a lot. Confrontation is one way to resolve conflict. Men would rather avoid it or sweep it under the carpet. Not in all cases, but in a lot of cases. Let me quote one of these old authors, Wordsworth. He said, "He who has a good friend needs no mirror. Blessed is the marriage where both spouses feel the other is a good friend and who will listen, understand, and walk through any problem or conflict. You see, you have to disabuse your mind of any negative mindset that makes you think that your spouse is just anti-you. The best person that sees you is your spouse. So confronting your spouse with grace and tactfulness requires wisdom, patience, and humility. So I'm going to share a few ways you can do that. If we're not able to conclude on how to resolve conflict, we may continue that conversation some other time. But I know this is very, very important. How to resolve conflict and how to confront your spouse with grace. Number one, check your motivation. Will your words help or hurt? Will bringing these up cause healing? Will it cause wholeness? Will it cause oneness or further isolation? You need to tick that box. Sometimes you want to talk to your spouse and then you first of all go back and say, maybe let me look at one good thing, so that it's not like I'm just bringing out the bad and the bad. And then is it important for me to say that thing? And is it important for me to say now? So check your motivation. Sometimes our motivation is just to prove that we are right. Check your motivation. Number two, check your attitude. A loving confrontation says, I care about you. I respect you. I want you to respect me too. I want to know how you feel. Don't hop on your bulldozer and run your spouse down. Approach your spouse lovingly. I'm talking about how to have a loving confrontation. Number three, check the circumstances. This includes timing, location, setting. Don't confront your spouse, for example, when he's tired from a hard day's work or in the middle of a settling of a squabble between you and the children. Also, please don't criticize, make fun of, or argue with your spouse in public. Do everything to work against that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Sometimes our spouses can be very lousy or naughty in public. But please, because once you point to that thing and other people get to know, you amplify it. Rather, it's not a good setting. Take your eyes off it. Number four, check to see what other pressures may be present. That means you have to be sensitive to where your spouse is coming from. What's the context of your spouse's life right now? Maybe this man just got laid off work and he's sleeping, and you are like, you just got laid off work and you're waking up at 9 o'clock. Are you okay? Is that the right thing you're supposed to do? Now, you don't understand that being laid off work can actually lead to sudden depression. So he is not sleeping likely because he's lazy. He's sleeping because he's yet to accept the reality that he's been laid off. And then when you're being laid off, is also saying more than just you lost your salary. It's passing a vote of no confidence in you. It's saying to you, you're not worth being retained. That is diminishing your worth. It can lead to you feeling rejected, and then that can lead to depression, which is a serious mental health issue. So you need to be sensitive to what is happening around your spouse. So to see what other pressures may be present. So be sensitive. The next point, listen. Listen to your spouse. Seek to understand his or her view and ask questions to clarify viewpoints. You see, assumption is the lowest form of knowledge, and most people just assume they know. No, please clarify. And the mere fact that you were right last week does not mean you are right again now. Most times you could be, but it does not mean that you are. The next point, be sure you are ready to take it as well as dish it out. Some of you are very good at saying it, but you're not ready to take it. So you may start to give your spouse some friendly advice and soon learn that what you are saying is not really his problem, but yours. So why don't you be ready to receive it as well? You're offering your wife or your husband food and he's not taking it, whereas the reason he doesn't want to eat the food is not so much because he's not hungry, but so much as he put too much salt, but he doesn't know how to tell you. So when you now say, you're not eating, and he says, do you, but the salt, really, or maybe mistakenly says, my mom didn't used to put a lot of sauce. Oh, you're now comparing me with your mom. Oh, so go and be eating your mother's food. Then what you're saying now leads to something else. We need to be careful. So as you're ready to dish it, you must be ready to take it. Then during the discussion, stick to one issue at a time. I know women, oh God, have mercy on women. You're talking about this issue, and then the woman will take you to 10 others. That's the way this and the way that. And then we'll quote time, place, moment, circumstance, and that really throws the man off. Men, I apologize on behalf of the women, because I know that most of the time we have these conflicts not resolved. So when they have the opportunity to have a conversation, we just quickly go back to that other one that had not been resolved. So the way to be able to have loving confrontation is sticking to one issue at a time. So try as much as possible not to bring up several. Don't save off series of complaints and let your spouse have them all at once. So, and I'm saying this to the men as well, please don't sweep issues under the carpet. If the issue is not resolved, talk about it until it is resolved and concluded. I can remember issues in my marriage that were resolved. They don't come up. But the ones that we haven't resolved, every opportunity, they show themselves. And they don't come alone. They come with their children and grandchildren. So it's important for us to know how to finish a conflict. Now, another thing is focus on the problem rather than the person. For example, you need a budget and your spouse is somehow a spender. Walk through the plans for finance and make the lack of budget the enemy, not the spouse. You may not be able to change your spouse from spending, but you can insist that we're going to have a budget. You can insist that we're going to have spendable income that is well divided. You can insist on the procedure for managing who spends what. And then you can resolve that, we earn 100,000 a month. We're saving 50,000 or 20,000. Each of us will have 10,000 that we can spend. And then you take your eyes off that 10,000. But if you see that there is more need in the house and you need to reduce the spends for each person from 10 to 5, let that be the issue. Not that you are just a spendthrift. You just spend money anyhow. No. Focus on the problem and not the person. We have quite a few more, but I have to stop because of time. I will be talking about wrapping up the year shortly, but I'll see if I can still put this in as we continue. One more time, I wish you a beautiful Christmas. A loving confrontation may occur, or you can resolve it. And for Jane and John, know that the problem is not Christmas. The problem is the decision making. Follow the Funmi Johnson for more.
Family Today with Funmi Johnson is powered by the Capstone Church Without Walls.